Hi, and welcome to the Navigating Pre- and Post-Doctoral Journey. I am Dr. Airies Davis, and I am one of the co-founders of JENGA Doctoral Association. So we're very excited to have you on board. We have a dynamic panel that is anxiously awaiting to chat with you all. Some housekeeping items, we'll go over them as we continue the conversation, but just note that this is going to be a private session. The session will be recorded. We will have Q&A embedded throughout the conversation, but this is truly an opportunity to engage you and to chat about your journey and also offer some advice and support and assistance as you continue through your journey. So with that being said, I would like to just pause for a minute and give special recognition to our host, Dr. Evelyn Castillo. She is the Doctoral Support Center Writing Advisor. For those who don't know, Rossier, USC Rossier School of Education has a support service that any doctoral student that wants to gather some one-on-one and even some group setting or even a private space just to have dialogue and conversation, she's there to support you along with others that are a part of the team. We were earlier on talking about some of our personal experiences with Dr. Castillo, and I would echo about everyone's sentiments that's been in any exposure to her willingness and ability to kind of take you underneath her wing and ensure that you not only start the process of your dissertation, but complete the process. That's that degree conferred that we'll obviously talk about a little bit later. So just a special recognition to Dr. Castillo for hosting us. The second point is Dr. Castillo is also a faculty chair of JENGA Doctoral Association, and we'll talk a little bit further about what that is, but she has been instrumental in helping us as a student organization to move forward our agenda. So here's a little bit about today's journey. We'll start off with a kickoff of information about JENGA Doctoral Association. Then we'll move into introductions of our panelists and also some of the board members for JENGA. And then again, we'll sprinkle in questions throughout. So the history of JENGA, the pulse check, the panelist questions are all a part of our discussion. So what is JENGA? What does it mean? Where did this organization come from? So the next couple of slides will explain that. But before we do that, just a couple of just general things to point out. There's a chat box that's at the very top of your screen. I just want everyone that is in attendance to just type at the very top, hi, or greetings, or some type of salutation so that we know that you are present and capable of using the chat box. Awesome, I see a lot of hello, hello, hello. Perfect. Inside the chat box at the very top, you will also see a Google link that will take you to our JENGA website. And it will also allow you to insert your name and your email address. So we encourage you to do that just so that we can capture your information. We do plan to share out some of the content that you will learn today. So it's very critical that we gather your first, last name, and email address. You do have the luxury of also typing that into the chat box. And our goal is to do our best to keep that chat box private. So you have the option of either putting it into our Google Sheet, which is located at the very top of the chat box, or you can actually put it into the actual chat box screen. Awesome, I see a lot of cool responses. So just a pulse check. I think it behooves us to really just take a moment to reflect on the fact that we are experiencing one of the most uncommon situations that I don't believe any of us have ever been a part of, and that's COVID-19, the pandemic. So anytime I start any type of discussions, albeit around education, business, etc., I like to kind of start with a pulse check of how are you feeling? So in the chat box, also a way for us to monitor your ability to use the functionality. How are you feeling today on a scale of 1 through 5, 5 being the highest? And just a quick notation, on the right side of the screen is a picture of how I felt the day that I ran out of Oreo cookies. And the picture at the bottom is me actually making a run to Walmart at the time to grab a sleeve. So how are you feeling? A big 5, yay. So a lot of positive thoughts. For those that may be in the 3s and the 2s, etc., here's something to keep in mind. And I'll put that, by the way, I'll put the Google Sheet back on the screen in the next couple of seconds. So if you missed it at the very top, we'll add it again. What brings you joy and gratitude? A lot of times it's hard for us to see between the weeds because we're entrenched into the process. So think about some words that bring you gratitude, some thoughts that bring you gratitude. I'll personally share, I have twin nephews, and they're 13 years old, and they're like night and day, quite frankly. And a lot of times just the ability to play Uno with them or just interact with them brings me a high level of joy. So think about that as you continue your conversations and as we go through this unfortunate journey. And then if you would like to share, how has your work and or your personal life been impacted by this current environment? Seeing your kids, etc. I see like a lot of really, really positive responses. So thank you again for sharing. And then the final housekeeping before we move into the history of Jenga and just share a little bit of background. If you have any burning questions, please place them into the chat box and we will certainly, again, respond to them throughout the session. And then we will also have at the very end of the session a parking lot so that we can pull up those questions at the end. And if you've had to make some dramatic changes as a result of this pandemic, we're just sending you our best wishes and note that this too shall pass. And I know that I noticed in the chat box, we've had some life-changing events that have happened as a result. This too shall pass. We're here to support each other and make sure that we get through this together. The moderators will ask questions. Our 2 moderators for today are Kendrick and Dr. Marcedes Butler, Kendrick Roberson and Dr. Marcedes Butler. I'll have them to introduce themselves a little bit later on in our conversation. And then final notation is that the panelists have been provided a list of questions in advance of this conversation. So they are very equipped and prepared to respond. But again, just note we will be able to answer questions throughout. Awesome. So again, what is Jenga? Jenga is an organization that was developed in 2015 in terms of the initial start, but it was founded by 8 African-American women with the same goal. And the initial goal was for us to persist and complete our doctoral journey, whatever that meant. The persistence is the operative word. So when we started off, it really started off as a mastermind group. So a little bit of historical context. I am a business individual or business professional. I don't come traditionally from the world of education. And so I always think about entrepreneurial pursuits or how do we advance professionally. I also come from the world of human resources and talent development. So with that being said, my initial thought was I know all of these people individually, but they don't know each other collectively. Why don't we get together and really kind of mastermind or group think about some opportunities? That in turn developed into us thinking about our journey through the doctoral process, meaning that how are we building community? How are we bonding with each other? What is the importance of us actually having this one-on-one dialogue? Recognizing the same need, which was for us to persist and complete the process, we thought it important for us to develop something that would be beneficial to all students that are going through a similar journey. So officially in 2016, we actually put the organization in what's called our graduate student government group, which means that you are officially recognized as a student organization. That means that all students who are a part of USC will have access to the materials and information that you share. So that's a huge feat for us to go from just, again, this group of women having conversation to ultimately us forming an actual group that is recognized and officially a part of the USC Trojan brand. The name is Jenga, And it has, it's an affectionate term for us because it means to build. If you look at the actual logo at the bottom of your screen, you'll notice, for those that are familiar with African symbols and principles, it has adinkra symbols, and each one of the adinkra symbols specifically address our personal statement and personal intent. So our purpose is to provide that professional development, that academic and career support, that social network, alumni relationships, and mentorships. It is an open organization. Our intent, again, is 100% graduation completion, and that's degree conferred. And Marcedes will probably, Dr. Butler will probably say that a couple of times as we talk. But we beat the odds. If you look at the statistics around those who have entered into any type of doctoral degree, albeit PhD, doctorate in business, DBA, EDD, etc., the percentage of those that actually complete the dissertation journey is extremely low. I think last we checked, the statistics noted less than 5% actually complete the process, and that means no ABD, all but dissertation. And so with that being said, we wanted to beat those odds and those statistics. So it's very rare to have a group of individuals, in this case, all 8 of us, to complete that entire journey. And that's what we're promoting and encouraging you with our efforts with JENGA. If you are interested in joining or being a part of the organization, it requires minimal commitment. We do a lot of things in partnership with the Doctoral Support Center, such as Dr. Castillo, Evelyn Castillo. We do a lot of work with some of the other faculty and staff at USC. And we also have other signature programs that are outside of the USC vein. We have a retreat and some other things that are also forthcoming. So final things before I pass the baton to Kendrick and Marcedes, I just wanted to give a personal shout out to the incoming board. So you'll notice these are the individuals who are leading the charge for JENGA 2020-2021. We have a lot of familiar faces that are listed, but I just want to take a moment to acknowledge them and thank them for the work that they are doing and will continue to do with the organization. And then just to kind of put a little bit of history behind the organization and share out a few other individuals who have led. We also have on the call our past president, Ginny, and Ginny is also one of the panelists. So you'll have Dr. Ginny, because she's degree conferred. So she will be answering questions and sharing out her personal journey. And then finally, these are some of the other individuals who've led and really kind of grown and developed the organization from the past: Asia, Marcel, etc. And then finally, when we first kind of passed the baton from the founders to our new board, some of the other individuals that are also on the line that are also panelists, we have Dr. Buckner, we have Theo Fowles, who was instrumental in supporting us from the USC Black Cultural Center. So we have a lot of heavy hitters that you'll hear about. So without further ado, I am raring up to pass the baton to Kendrick and Marcedes. But if you need to contact us with any questions or need any additional support, our contact information is listed on the screen. And as noted, we will share out this information thereafter, and we'll collect your information so that you will be able to receive an edited version of the recording. So without further ado, Kendrick and Marcedes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kendrick. I'm the president, the new incoming president of JENGA. And again, just I want to throw this out there. If you guys are very interested in, joining us for this mission as we move forward, as we press on, please do not hesitate to text me or to hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, or email me. We're definitely looking for more members to join our board. And, we have this season right now of coronavirus, the pandemic, and I think that makes our mission more important than ever, to make sure that we can get resources and mentorship to those folks who need it most during this season, where we're not actually in the presence of our associates here at USC. So I want to give an introduction to all of the panelists that we have today. And so first, I know you guys just talk to Dr. Airies Davis, who will also be chiming in with us. But I want to start off by talking about our other moderator, Dr. Marcedes Butler. So if you would like to go ahead and tell a little bit.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Marcedes Butler. I graduated from USC in 2016. I currently have an educational consulting business. I'm working with the College Opportunity Program, COP, which is a corporate partnership between MGM and the Nevada System of Higher Education to offer free degrees. And I put my contact information in the chat box.
Absolutely, thank you. And then now we're going to have Dr. Ginny. Oh, wait, maybe I have to unmute her.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes.
Awesome, thank you. I'm Ginny Linenberger. I'm very excited to be here today. Thank you for having me. And I'm so excited to get everyone interested in JENGA, such a wonderful organization. I currently work in special education. I've been in education for almost 2 decades now, specifically with special education and working in counseling. I work with the transitional kindergarten all the way through 12th grade at a school district in the Inland Empire, working with specialized academic instruction, and I focus on secondary transition. So transition, from middle to high school, and then the transition from high school to college and career. And I also work as an adjunct instructor for the Los Angeles County Office of Education and work with curriculum development as well for teacher education programs. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ginny. Dr. Theo?
Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Theo Fowles. My pronouns are he, him, his. I received my degree in 2018. I currently work for America Needs You, which is a nonprofit that supports first generation college students, providing them with mentorship and a pipeline to internships. But I recently got that role. I was formerly the assistant director for the Center for Black Cultural and Student Affairs at USC. So I made that transition about 6 months ago, but really excited to give back and talk with fellow Trojans along the pathway, because I know the journey is an exciting one, a nerve-wracking one, but ultimately impactful one. So really looking forward to contributing today.
All right, thank you. Ms. Kelly? Oh, let me see.
Oh.
There we go.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelebogile Zvobgo. I am a 5th-year PhD candidate in political science. I specialize in international relations with a focus on human rights and post-conflict justice. I am a USC Provost Fellow and also a National Science Foundation Fellow. And currently I am in Williamsburg, Virginia at William & Mary in a pre-doctoral fellowship at the Global Research Institute. And starting in fall 21, I'll be an assistant professor in the government department.
Yes. All right, thank you. And then Dr. Corey? Let me see.
Good morning, everyone. Corey Buckner, what a pleasure to be here with everyone. Just always excited to get to share our experiences, kind of provide some inspiration and some insight on this once-in-a-lifetime journey. So couldn't be more happy to be here. I'm class of 2017. I currently work at USC in the athletic department. I'm assistant director for academic support for our student athletes. I've been in academic support for student athletes for about roughly the last 15 years. Essentially, we're about inspiring, motivating, guiding, and teaching student athletes how to not just be successful in the classroom, but for the game of life. We'll currently, in the fall, be teaching in the School of Rasier, the EDUC 617 student athletes in higher education. And it's my lens from which I am able to empower, and I look forward to talking a little bit more shortly about how I've utilized that through my my dissertation. So thanks again for having me all.
All right, thanks so much for being here. And so Dr. Phillips, who is a political science professor over at the Political Science and International Relations program, is not able to make it today because there was a family emergency, and we all know how that is. So prayers and blessings over to her family. And without further ado, we'll get started on navigating the pre/postdoctoral journey. Dr. Marcedes?
All right. So the first question is, how did you arrive at your topic or research question for your dissertation? Was this a difficult process? And if I can ask Dr. Ginny, congratulations, and then thank you again for your leadership with JENGA. If you could start with that first question, please.
Sure. It was easy and difficult at the same time, and I'll explain that. For me, I think for a lot of us, we come in with this idea, that we want to fight for social justice for everybody and for all people, and it seems so much bigger than ourselves. So that was challenging because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. And then when talking with mentors, I realized working in special education and focusing on the students that are underrepresented that I work with, where my experience and expertise lies, was the way to go. And in working with students with secondary transition, so students who have an individual education program, it can be from learning disability, autism, intellectual disability, speech and language impairment. There are 13 different categories. And I won't name them all, but from whatever those students are going through and dealing with, they're given a lot of support in high school. And unfortunately, when they get to college and career, there's not as much support. And there's a 37% discrepancy with unemployment and individuals who have had an individual education program in high school that do not continue that. And the reason is that you have to self-disclose if you have a disability. So I worked and focused on that area specifically. My dissertation title is Meeting the Unique Needs of Special Populations Through Secondary Transition. So I was able to really focus on what I was already doing in my own practice and my own career, and bring that to a broader group of individuals, and hoping to help the students that I work with as they make that transition. So it was challenging at first, but once I was able to narrow down my intent in helping one specific population, it really helped me. And my students were amazing, and they helped me with developing my curriculum, because I had an opportunity to sit down and say, well, what could I do to help you as your case manager, as your teacher? What would help you? And I think that is a lot of the challenge too, is we look at minoritized or marginalized populations and think, well, I don't have any unique or special needs, so I don't know what it's like. So you go to the people that you want to help, that you want to work with, and ask them, hey, what can I do that would help? And so they were really a blessing to me and gave me a lot of insight and helped me to understand what would be helpful in developing curriculum. So I developed a professional development curriculum to work with other special education teachers so that they can in turn help their students with transition. That was a long answer, sorry.
Okay.
And Dr. Corey, will you also answer that question? I know you were alluding to that in your introduction.
There we go.
All right. Jenny, thank you for that lovely answer. I think I can echo some of her sentiments, a lot of her sentiments. You come into this program wide-eyed, and you wanting to save the world, right? And it's just it's a little overwhelming when you look at it from that lens. And it's important to know your positionality, to know your lane, and really dig deep into what it is you're trying to change, especially in our program as change agents. And, you know, we talk about theory and practice, and for what we do in our program, it's about, is this going to impact change, right? So for me, coming into the program with my athletic academic support background, working with football and basketball, and these are our two top revenue generating sports. And you look in the literature, you'll see that there's an overrepresentation of Black males in those sports, but an underrepresentation in the college campuses at large, as well as the dismal graduation rates. And that's something that we knew, and I knew this going into it, but I didn't know how it was going to lend itself towards my study. But I also knew that, okay, that was starting point. That was the issue, and it was glaring, right? So what I was able to do through the program was I remained flexible in terms of what my research questions was going to be, but I wrote on every single topic you could talk about. And I think what you'll see is, if you're strategic with this, that's how you find the gap. And when I talked about, like I said, the dismal graduation rates, the cognitive and non-cognitive variables that impact persistence to their lived experiences on campus, identity development, career maturation, and athletic identity, and how it impacts just your paradigm for life. Long story short, by the end of it, I knew that I think it was in our research methods class, I ended up doing a pilot study. And when I did the pilot study, I was actually talking about the experiences that Black male student athletes had with academic support. But what I realized was, based on my positionality, I was only getting just this much of the information, which lent itself to my study, which was exploring the academic success of Black male former student athletes and their experiences with support upon reentry. Because what I realized was that I could get the before and after. And when we had students, our student athletes that went to the NFL, and they were coming back as 35, 30, 36, 27-year-old students, and they've experienced both sides of it. So I wouldn't have known that if I wouldn't have opened myself up to letting my topic come to me. And I know you'll feel a lot of pressure to know exactly what your questions are at first, but they'll come to you. Trust the process, and you'll be able to see through your papers how there are themes, and you'll scour the literature enough to where it's saturated, and you'll be able to see, okay, this is where the gap is. Long story short, it was a challenge, like Ginny said, but you got to understand that challenge is, when it gets challenging, you get stronger, and you're actually narrowing your scope, and then you push past that, and you'll eventually end up where you need to be in terms of figuring out what your topic is and your research questions. That's it.
Kelly? I'm going to mute you, Kelly. Give us 1 second. And then Dr. Theo, you're up next.
Yeah, I think, Kelly, you still got to unmute yourself after I hit unmute.
Okay. Everyone hear me? All right, great. So I came into graduate school with a pretty defined set of interests. In fact, it was studying post-conflict justice, post-authoritarian justice in South Africa, Sierra Leone, and Timor-Leste in my undergraduate thesis that prompted me to pursue a PhD in the first place. So I knew I wanted to do transitional justice, but I didn't know essentially what idea was big enough for a book, because in international relations, it's still very much the book is the style of the dissertation you write, and that's how you articulate you make your first contribution to scholarship a few years after completion of degree. And so there are lots of different topics. Like, I was interested in how you can get buy-in from like ex-combatants and former perpetrators into these processes. I also was curious about how to engage children within transitional justice, because they also suffer violence, but are often marginalized in terms of transitional justice, whether it's truth commissions, restorative practices, etc. Anyway, so kind of like Corey raised, I just kept reading, and the more you read, the more you bump up against things that frustrate you. And then that's kind of, for me at least, how I identified the gap that I was then going to fill. Transitional justice and human rights more generally has typically, or was previously historically studied using qualitative methods. And so we knew a few cases very, very well. And there's been this expansion over the last decade or so into studying transitional justice more systematically, cross-nationally. So here now using quantitative data. And I was just frustrated by these studies that tried to link the implementation or use of a given mechanism, trials, truth commissions, reparations, et cetera, and trying to tie it to outcomes like human rights respect, democracy, et cetera. And I was like, whoa, I definitely want there to be a link between, these forms of justice, restorative, retributive, transformative, et cetera, and these like political outcomes. But I don't see the link. These are just correlational studies and people are making a lot of them. And so I thought, okay, like what's a way that truth commissions, as one example, could influence democracy? And it's like, well, they do make recommendations to policymakers, and some of these may be about democracy. So I started looking at the different outputs of these different transitional justice processes as an effort to then match them to these like bigger macro outcomes. And so just being frustrated by these like very broad strokes studies that offered mixed results, in part because they were theoretically underspecified, and then the measurement approaches were pretty blunt. And so that's kind of like how I got into studying truth commissions as one part of transitional justice as a policy generating process, not just accounting for what happened in the past, but providing governments a blueprint forward, and then looking at whether or not the government follows that blueprint, and then linking it to these outcomes we care about: democracy, durability of peace, respect for human rights, etc.
Thank you for sharing. Dr. Theo?
Awesome. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So in thinking about how I chose my topic, I think what it really boiled down to me was in the dissertation writing process, they ask you what the problem is, right? And in my experience, first as a high school teacher, then working in nonprofits, the problem that kept coming up for me was the idea that media and social media were just tools that weren't very impactful in nature for any type of learning, right? My dissertation focuses on how former foster youth use social media to navigate higher ed spaces. And that seems really specific, but it all boiled down to the fact that I was trying to explain the problem that I was having in my jobs, in my workplace, right? As a first to third year high school teacher coming out of undergrad, I was like, hey, I studied film throughout my whole college career. I'm going to use these as tools to help my students learn. And some people looked at that avenue as not as beneficial. And I wanted to say, it can be, and here's why. I wanted to become an expert in the problem that I saw. And so my journey was focused on how do I give my experience a relevant lens that I can then go back and impact, the roles that I will have in the future, right? So currently, I work, again, with first generation college students, and it so happens that we're in a pandemic where now everybody is trying to be relevant within a digital space. And I'm like, 2 years ago, y'all wasn't trying to hear me, but now everybody's an expert. And so sometimes when you're chipping away at your idea, it doesn't seem like it's quite the time for it. And so I just say fall back on some of your own experiences, figure out what that problem is so that you can then speak to it when it's time, right? And sometimes it doesn't feel like it's quite the time just yet, but please believe it'll come.
Okay, so moving right along. So adding on to the first question, did you ever question your commitment to your topic? Did you change your topic or your research questions? Did anyone experience that?
I could start. Yeah, so my topic, I would say, evolved over the graduate school experience, in part because I was exploring, as someone else raised. I think that was Corey in another response. This is linked a little bit to the question about papers that were written during coursework. And so this is something that I know that people are coming from like different stages of their doctoral careers at the moment. One thing that I found useful was to write the fewest number of papers possible. And so of course, definitely like check with your professors to see that if you're taking an American politics class, let's say, and a methodology class, can you write one paper for both and thereby have more time to really sit with the ideas, refine them, and to bring the substantive and the methodological together? Or let's say you're taking an American politics class and a comparative politics class. The US is one case of something, right? And so if you're interested in studying solidarity politics among racial and ethnic minorities, you can do that in the US, and you can also do it in Brazil, for example, right? And so finding out ways to spend more time with any given question you're exploring in a semester by having these fewer topics. And also related to that is, even if you don't explore it as a dissertation topic, there are papers that you read along the way that can be standalone publications. So as an example, my first year research design paper was a paper measuring American attitudes towards international institutions, in particular the International Criminal Court. That was just the research design. I didn't do like a lot of the theory and the literature because that wasn't for that class. But then I took an international law class and refined that piece of it. And then I took an international organizations class and kept adding to it. And so that ended up being my qualifying paper for my exams. And I ended up submitting that around the time that I was writing my prospectus, and like that's now, so even though I was moving on to my more core transitional justice topics, that resulted in a publication in a top buyer journal. And so you can shed things, like give yourself the space to not want to pursue something all the way to like a book, let's say, but like don't have your brilliant ideas die on your desktop, right? Like there's this principle one of my mentors blazed into my mind, which is get it off your desk, right? And so like, because everything, it's better to take something that's at 50% to 80 to 90 to 100 than to keep exploring things at 10%, because nobody's going to recognize, like 50 projects that are all at 10% and don't meet past the threshold. So if you're working on fewer things, but building on them, some of them will turn out to be more fruitful. And so then you can explore that in a fuller project, whether you're doing a multiple article dissertation or a book style dissertation, but to the extent that, like in my case, the International Criminal Court and international institutions, it's still relevant to human rights. And so it's consistent with my overall portfolio as a human rights scholar, but it's something that I wasn't going to explore beyond that particular project. And so don't let things die, kind of like economize, like hunters, they use the meat and then the horns and the fur and like all that stuff, right? Like make the most of the work that you're doing, because you work too hard for things to die like in the graveyard of your desktop folders.
Thank you, Kelly. Next, we're going to have Dr. Evelyn Felina speak on the topic.
I want to piggyback on what Kelly has said about your coursework. So I know also in the chat, there were some students that were asking when should they start. So think about all of your coursework as a piece of your literature review, especially those of you who are in OCL, where your coursework is building upon, is the foundation for your proposal. So for example, the learning and motivation course, if you're an OCL and you're part of the older cohorts of OCL, learning, right? Knowledge is part of your theoretical framework, so is motivation. So think about the stakeholders that you're thinking to work with. It might not be perfect today in that class, but eventually what you work with, like Kelly was saying, is you're going to build upon it when you actually finalize your proposal. So don't think that the courses are just extraneous, because I know some professors are kind of like, oh, you guys are in a time frame of just exploring. I'd say be a little bit more purposeful in that these are the buckets you're trying to fill, and it might not fit perfectly yet. It's when you refine your proposal that you need to make all of those mini lit reviews that you've been working on fit for your proposal. Okay? That's just my 2 cents right now.
Important 2 cents. Thank you. Thank you so much. So our next question is, how did you select your dissertation chair and committee? Did you have committee members that were not affiliated with USC? And Dr. Theo, will you start this question, please?
Sure. So all of my committee members were connected to USC. I actually had co-chairs and a third. So what I can say is that in selecting your chairs, I think this is a more personal decision than people may realize. So for example, I'm a very creative brain, right? I like sticky notes. When I get an idea, I try to visualize it in some way. Excel spreadsheets are the bane of my existence. Whenever I look at them, I understand that they say something, but it takes me a while to figure it out, right? I'm also a person that is very easygoing. And so what happened in my chair selection was that my chairs were also easygoing. And so that combination of me being easygoing and saying, everything's gonna be fine. And my committee chair is like, oh, you're doing great. And then I looked around and all of my friends had also graduated. And I was like, wait, I'm still here. So I might be doing great, but I'm just taking a long time to be great. And so just figure out how you learn, how you operate. If you're a person that needs to stick to a timeline for whatever reason, be sure to really ask about those kind of things. Be critical. Say, hey, what is your timeline? This is my timeline. This is how I like to interact with people, right? And so, if you're a person that doesn't get an email back, immediately when you send something, you can shift based on those type of things, right? But I think it's very important to kind of get that sneak peek, and sometimes you don't get that in the initial kind of introduction when they're like, hey, this is your 10 minutes to decide your your committee chair, right? Really try to carve out some extra time to make that decision. So that's my tidbits for outreach. But I would also say, as you're grabbing articles and reading people's different works, reach out to them on Twitter or LinkedIn. So if there's someone that's not at USC or, in another space, feel free to say, hey, I'm really interested in making an impact in this way. Would you consider, being an advisor of sorts, or when the time comes, if you do need another person on the committee, you've already reached out to them a little bit and then they know who you are. So.
Thank you, Dr. Theo. Okay, so we have a question from the chat box. For first year EDD students, doctoral students, how would you recommend starting a dissertation this summer, starting the dissertation early? Dr. Ginny, I think you want to say something?
Sure, I can speak to that. I know that the program has changed slightly. However, I would strongly recommend that you start narrowing your interests at this point. And I think Dr. Castillo shared that in looking for your literature review. So, and I think someone else spoke to this as well. You can utilize the same research and the same information across multiple courses. So while you may be writing a different paper, or it may be strictly research, or you may be using some of that research to design curriculum, you can use what you've done from other classes. So I would recommend that you maybe not solidify a topic, but choose a broader area that you want to focus on. So for mine, it was working with individuals with special needs. So students who receive special education services at the high school level. And I was able to have almost my complete literature review finish, at least the literature part, and bringing and consuming that research, so that it was so much easier for me to write that because I had narrowed my topic down. I did change from a traditional 5-chapter to curriculum design in my 3rd year. And the reason I changed from that, realizing I had a former student of mine who's also a doctoral candidate now. And she said to me, she'd taken a course with me, and she said, I don't understand why you're not using what you already do. And it was, you know, that light bulb moment. I said, well, wait a minute, this is what I do. This is what I should be doing. So I would say definitely start with your literature, which would be your chapter 2, and have most of that completed. But then when you feel led in a certain direction, then you can go that way. So you'll have your literature, but you'll still be able to keep an open mind of, well, if I want to make these changes, I can. It really helped me to have that done. The majority of my friends in my cohort that are not graduating in May, they'll have their degree conferred in August, or they'll continue on into the fall. They all started from scratch. So they didn't have a lot of their research done, which takes a lot of time. So if you have an interest, I would highly recommend you start researching that and have your papers guided around those ideas.
Mm-hmm. I hope you don't mind, Marcedes. Let me just jump in for just a minute. 2 things. The first part with regard to the dissertation chairs, all of you are, I want to say majority of you are in the newer cohorts, and the way dissertation chairs are assigned is a little bit different from when our graduates that are talking on this panel were able to approach faculty. So for those of you who are in OCL, there's certain faculty that will be assigned to specific cohort groups. At this time, I don't think the newer cohorts, I don't have that list, so I couldn't tell you who is assigned to those newer cohorts. But the older ones, if you're here a year or 2 now, you have a specific set of faculty that will be working with you. Now, I know there's some survey that you do that says what areas are you interested in, and then they will kind of assign you to faculty in that way. And then eventually there's some discussion whether or not there's a good fit. But for now, I would tell you those assignments are kind of out of your hands for the moment until you get to, I believe, your 2nd immersion, okay? Because when you get to your 2nd immersion, that's when they'll be able to tell you, okay, here are the faculty officially that are available to monitor dissertations, okay? The second one is going back to what Ginny was saying. So be mindful there's of self-plagiarism. So when you do try to combine courses like papers, as Kelly has mentioned, it is possible, but you do need to get approval from both professors, because both professors, if they find that you didn't talk to them about it and then they see that it's the same paper or there's very little difference between the papers, then you could get dinged. I'm trying to think of a nicer word. They could submit your work to judicial review. So I don't want anybody to be in that situation. And again, let me just say OCL is unique in that all of your coursework builds upon that proposal. But just think about this, those of you in OCL, as you become more expert, your writing should change. I should not see that statement of your proposal, or sorry, statement of your problem to be static. it needs to evolve from your framing class all the way to your proposal defense. It shouldn't be static. It needs to change, because every time you learn more in a class, some of that information that you have in that statement of your problem should change. If it didn't change, that means you didn't do any work. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Dr. Fowles?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in just to say, even though the process has changed a little bit and you know the assignments have changed, I think we can all agree that you know we're here for the USC network, right? And so just because you're assigned, you know, a particular professor doesn't mean that you can't talk to anyone else, right? I think I see a couple of folks I know or recognize on the line that are good networkers, and I think that that's really key to the USC journey overall. So take the time to take advantage of the people that are around you. That's you know, fellow students, but also all of the professors, right? So if you're going to class and then leaving and you haven't really talked to the professor just outside of the assignment, it's like take the time to do that, right? Because when you need an outside perspective on something, you know, it's really key. I came into the program as a TEMS TEM student teaching English. I don't even remember what TEMS stands for anymore, right? But I was having a conversation with another professor, and they asked, "Why are you in that cohort group? You should be in educational psychology." And once they gave me that perspective, I was like, "Oh, you're right. I should be in educational psychology, right?" And so sometimes, you know, speaking to other professors will push you over the edge. There you go. I see some TEMS folks in there. Shout out to TEMS.
Thank you. So we're going to move to the next section, but before we do, we have a quick follow-up question from the chat group. And that question is, how do we filter for opportunities that we are seeking during this stage? And that's open to anybody on the panel.
Can they elaborate what they mean?
Does anybody want to elaborate on? Yeah, there we go. Does anybody want to elaborate on the how do we filter for opportunities that we are seeking?
I'll jump in, Kendrick. I believe that they may be, and they can actually just type into the chat box what they were alluding to, but my understanding is how do we filter, I would assume, job or career opportunities that we're seeking post dissertation journey? And if that's not the question, go ahead and type it in the chat so that I can best answer. My response, being someone who comes from the world of work and placement and again, talent development and organizational leadership and the like, it's really important for you to think about the topic that you're choosing and how you want that topic to really influence your afterlife. And I say afterlife, meaning after the dissertation. What I found is that some of the materials that I collected, some of the conversations that I had, to the point of what many of the panelists have mentioned, were all transferable to me in the world of work. So what I mean by that is I've had situations where I went into interviews and literally spoke about some of my research findings in those conversations. And that was really a precursor to the dialogue, and it allowed me to really be transparent and open, and it also provided a certain depth of credibility about my background. So that was extremely helpful. And it looks like we have a little bit of a clarifying what I want to do, but okay. Yes, so it looks like that is a part of the question. But it was extremely helpful because I really was able to take from what I knew and apply it into practice. So that's essentially what you're doing when you do enter the world of work. We want to know that you are bringing your authentic self in the vein that you are, one, taking from the research practices, because at the point of you going through that process and your chair says, congratulations, doctor, fill in the blank, they are considering you at that point a subject matter expert in that particular area of discipline that you've identified as a part of your dissertation. So as you're having conversations about career opportunities, et cetera, use that information to your advantage. Step in with confidence, noting that I have been able to speak to these subjects. That's one way. And then finally, I would say draw upon any of your past professional expertise and utilize that in a way that you can actually search for career opportunities based on that area of expertise. So for example, a lot of times when I'm searching for positions or just kind of putting myself out there for executive coaching, I will intentionally reach out to maybe those from the Trojan brand to start, because that gives me the ability to have like-minded individuals who understand my journey. And then secondly, I will go to individuals that may be a little bit more outside of that vein. So I'll just pause there for a second and just say, use the brand to your advantage and also rely on the fact that second, you are a subject matter expert. I'll toss it back over to Kendrick and or Marcedes.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll move forward to the collecting data and writing the dissertation section, which I know a lot of folks on the call are in. And so the first question that we're going to ask the panel is, how was the process of collecting data during the dissertation process? And did you run into issues gaining access to the population you wanted to study? And what data collection methods did you use, et cetera? How did that whole data collection process go?
Dr. Corey, you want to start us off, please?
Certainly. I think it's important to know as you decipher. Well, first, before I get started, I did interviews, so qualitative study, and I was looking at, like I said, interviewing Black male former student athletes, and I did this strategically because I realized that based on my positionality, one, and understanding IRB and vulnerable populations, I wasn't going to look at the student athletes that were currently whether NCAA eligible student athletes, because there's a lot of red tape around that, and you only have a certain amount of time to complete this dissertation, and I think you want to keep that in mind when you're deciding on your population, and that it was helpful for me because I come from an athletic background. I'm very well connected in that realm, and so I use snowballing effect, right? So I had a couple people in mind, and from that, then we started to say, well, who else do you know that would like to participate in this study? And so, like I said, based on my positionality and my network, I had the keys to the car, and I think that's important to know. Like before going into it, like who are the gatekeepers? Is it feasible with the time frame that you have to do your study? And so from where I sit, and I think some of our other panelists may have another take, I didn't have a lot of issues finding participants to interview, and surprisingly, a lot of them wanted to tell their story. So I actually had it was a good experience for me.
Thank you. Do any of the other panelists want to chime in there? Ginny?
Sure, happy to. It was a different experience for me as well. I didn't do a mixed methods quant or a qual study. I went with curriculum design. So that afforded me the opportunity to work on my timeline. So I was not relying on individuals to show up for interviews or return questionnaires. So that was very helpful to me. I am a mom. I have a just turned 10-year-old and almost 13-year-old, and then I work full-time, and then I also have a part-time job. So for me, that was something that drove me into curriculum design as well. It almost solidified my decision that that's where I should go. With a PhD, of course, you're going to be working with independent research, but when you're working with your EDD, regardless of what program you're in, there are different opportunities. So you can look at program evaluation or curriculum design as well. So I did not have an issue with that either.
I think the only thing that I would contribute to this portion is just to say, when I started, I remember wanting to study everything. You know, I'm gonna get people from this place, that place, this place, and that place. It's gonna be great. All the research is gonna be done, and it's not. So really focusing and narrowing your topic is important, but also just remember, like, you want to save yourself some future studies right there at the end of your dissertation. There's always, well, what's next? You know, how else can people contribute, right? And you want to leave yourself some of those things to contribute as well. So you don't have to study everything. You have to study one thing, and if you want to continue studying, that's a whole new book. That's a whole new article. That's a whole new blog. That's a whole new, you know, YouTube series, whole new TikTok, right? So I told y'all I like social media. But anyway, that's my contribution to this. It's really important to narrow yourself down.
All right. Thank you. All right. So, you know, we're in Zoom, so excuse if you guys hear the gardeners in the background doing some weed busting back there. But so the next question is, how did you, understanding that time management is very important, right? How did you manage your multiple priorities, you know, work, family, et cetera, to ensure that you created dedicated time to actually write your dissertation?
I can start. So people have different approaches to their writing. And so this is definitely not for everyone, but something that has worked really well for me, which is, and, you know, I don't want PhD students like, you know, time shaming me. But I don't work on the weekends. I don't, like, as a matter of course. That is so important for being able to be in touch and spend time with and invest in my loved ones, in my mental health, in my sleep, my rest, etc. Practicing my faith, all those different things. And so, like, weekends are off, right? And really, when you think about it, like trying to work on a Saturday, you stop, oh, I gotta put in some laundry. Oh, I need to go pick up this from Trader Joe's. Like, you're just stretching out your day and not being especially productive because your focus is interrupted and broken. And so for me, definitely Monday through Friday. And within that, treating this very much like a job, right? Because it is a job. And so the whole idea of, like, you know, working like 17-hour days is ridiculous because, again, you're not being efficient. I mean, if you can work 17 hours a day and, like, you know, have like laser beam, crystal clear focus, I mean, like, bottle that up, and like you should probably be doing something else other than academia if, like, you have that as, like, you know, those types of intellectual resources. But for we mere mortals, like, you know, like in terms of like quality, solid writing, like analysis of data, etc., like it's gonna be like a work day, right? And so if you know, let's say it's like 9 to 5, 9 to 6, and of course there's flexibility. There are days where like you're in the office or in the lab for 14 hours, sure. But if you just have a basic structure that you know that, like, after this time, I can excuse myself from work, I'm gonna go work out, I'm gonna go cook dinner or whatever. And so having that as a way to organize your time so that when you are working, you are really working, right? Now, of course, people have different familial obligations. So I'm saying this like as someone who is a single person who lives on their own and does not have caretaking responsibilities. But even within that, my friends who have kids, like if that meant that they had the time from when they drop off their kids to when their kids end school and they start having to, you know, caravan to soccer and to ballet and to recitals and all these different things, then that's the time frame you're working in. And then maybe it's like until they go to bed at like 8 or 9, and then you pick it back up. But just, you know, putting limits and respecting those limits, whatever that means for you, working efficiently within that time and making sure that it overlaps with when you're most productive. So for me, where possible, I'm not talking to anyone, I'm not emailing anyone, I'm not setting up a Skype, no office hours before noon, because that morning is like my golden time, and it really just like sets the tone for everything else. And so I'm available afternoon, but previous to that, like that is like my quality like writing time. And I learned this from one of my like junior faculty mentors at USC, and I thought he was totally obnoxious when he said this, because I was like, hey, Jonathan, I have a question. He's like, sorry, this is prime writing time. And he just kept walking. And I was like, what? This is Markowitz, Kendrick, for context, since we're in the same PhD program. And I just thought it was like the most crazy thing ever. But then like when he would then meet with students, myself included, or his undergrads, like he was totally and wholly present. And so that's one thing that I recommend in terms of time management, in terms of the day-to-day, week-to-week. And then also I think more generally in terms of project management, right? If you want to like defend, let's say in the spring of 22, that means more or less being done in the spring of 21, right? And so like what can you execute on your project like over the next year, or whatever your timeline is, and then working backwards from there. Because what you want to be able to do a few things really well. So if you end up writing 7 chapters, but they're just kind of like so-so, but maybe like 3 chapters or 4 chapters, like, or only having like, you know, 1 experiment and then a survey and then some like data from the archives or what have you, just being very, very like measured and controlled in terms of like, this is like when I need to exit USC, which means this is when I need to be done, because you're going to need something from that for the job market, right? And just kind of like working backwards from there. So yeah, so there's the day-to-day, but then there's the also like, what is the trajectory of my career? When do I want to be done? And so when would my committee, when would I need to defend? When would my committee need my full draft? And work back from there. And it's it freaked me out when I was told this. Someone was like, oh, Kelly, like, when do you want to go on the market? And I said, oh, I want to go on the market in the fall of 20. And then they're like, okay, then if that's the case, then you have to, you know, be submitting something for review in the fall of 18. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, because peer review can take 2 years for you to go through the process. You know, rejections, revise and resubmit, a reviewer falls off the face of the planet, doesn't respond, and then finally you get your acceptance and you do proofs and those kinds of things. So I will stop there.
Thank you, thank you. That was some strong advice. Does anyone else want to follow up on this question before we go to the next one? Yes, sir. Dr. Corey.
Thank you, thank you. I couldn't agree more with you, Kelly. And I think one of the last things you said really hit home for me is like that working backwards. I think it's important to have some clarity and you know, working with your chair. And I know I was fortunate enough to have a chair who asked me when I wanted to be finished. And it was such a critical question. And I think if you don't hear that question, you take the lead. This is your education. You're paying a lot of money for this. Take the lead. Your future self will thank you. I promise you, because now you hear it all the time. It's not real unless it's on your schedule. We can talk all about when you want to, you know, want shows up in conversation. Expectation shows up in behavior. Remember that, okay? So when you have already set it in motion, you start working towards it. I think now your time starts to manage itself because that date is already there. And as Kelly said, you're just working backwards. And it adds a little pressure to you, but you'll start to see how we're built to thrive under pressure. You know, without that, we sit back and we say, oh, we'll get it done. No, when you see that date by this, my chair needs this done, you don't want to let your chair down. So you're going to get it done. That's that social obligation and accountability that comes along with it, right? So I think a little different from Kelly that I did was like, I actually utilized my weekends to write. I couldn't write during the week. I just, after a long day working in college athletics, our schedules it's not the typical 8 to 5 schedule. And so when I would try to sit down and write, I mean, I would just be sitting at the computer like this. Nothing would come out. And I think it's an organic process. You got to try it. And it's like, you don't know what works until you know what doesn't work. And so I was able to find out that well, when Saturday came along and, you know, I I'm an early morning riser. I get up at 4 in the morning, and so I would just start writing. And if I started writing at, I don't know, 5 o'clock, and I'd go until about 2 o'clock, I still got the rest of the day. You know what I mean? And I'm feeling wonderful about my day because I just blocked off this time. So if I wanted to go spend some time with friends or do some things that made sense for me, I could. And so I would do that Saturday and Sunday mornings. I wouldn't go past 3 o'clock. And that was just my hard point. But you'd be surprised how much you can get done. I mean, when we talk about flow is so important. When you knock out all distractions, and as Kelly was saying, no, you don't mess with me. This is my time. Being super, super clear with those in your corner, your family, your loved ones, that clarity in terms of your time allocation will allow you to totally focus. It's when you're not communicating with those in your corner what the timeline is that you start running into trouble because you don't have the boundaries. So it's super, super important for you to set those boundaries because now you're able to lock in and really get things done. Like I said, if you set those 5-6 hours aside, you'd be surprised like how much you can get done. And like real quick, I didn't work on the week at all on my dissertation. I didn't touch it. Those weekends allowed me to get it done. So it's kind of going off what Kelly said, there's totally different methods. You got to figure out what works for you. Set the date out front and then work backwards.
I'm going to jump in right there, Corey. You are so right. The reason why we created the DSC Time to Write was because we were seeing that students were struggling with that, actually setting those boundaries and setting up designated time to actually write. And everybody in any of our programs, especially the EDL and the OCL, we know that you guys are, it's part-time. The academic part is part-time. So we had long time ago the Thursday night writes and we brought it back. So I just want to shout out to all of you that are out there. We're doing it now online. It is different from when we did it on campus, because I think the social aspects of being together in one room or being in a location also gives you that boundaries, right? Because you could say to your family, I have to go to school. So now that we're in this situation where we're using Zoom, you're in your house still, right? You're not in a cafe. You're not at Wait Phillips with me, or when we were having it in Wait Phillips. So you have to be able to tell your family when I'm, in weekend right or Thursday night right, or if I'm in my space, no one can interrupt me because I'm in the zone, right? I'm trying to write, put out content, because content is not easy. You might get one paragraph out of 3 hours, right? I mean, those of you who are done, you know what I'm talking about, yeah. Right? So you guys have to be really good to yourself and say, this is my time. It's not just a paper. Because you know how that family members say, aren't you done with your paper? Hell no, it's not a paper. It's a dissertation, right? Because that's what families are assuming. They don't know what it's like. And to dedicate that time, you have to tell them. Like Corey and Ginny said, you have to tell your family members, or else they won't know. They'll just get mad at you. You're not coming to grandma's party? Yes, I have. It's in my time frame. If you move grandma's party to after 3, we'll be good, right? But you have to be able to stick to your guns and say, I'll go for Thanksgiving, I'll go for Christmas. Any other time, I'm not gonna be there. I'll be there when I'm done.
Yeah, some of my friends have found it useful to just tell their families that they're writing the first draft of their first book, not use the word dissertation at all. Because people just like look at a book and they're like, oh, like, and an academic book, like this is not about to be some J.K. Rowling stuff, right? And so then people are like, oh, okay, we gotta leave them alone because they're like writing a book, right? Dissertation's kind of like, okay, it's a very large paper. No, like, and so just like, even if that's not even necessarily your approach, you're doing like multiple articles, but just like communicating in a more like digestible format. Because even articles like 30, 40,000 or 10, 15,000 words, right? So, yeah.
So thank you. Yes. So we're, pushing up on time. So what we're going to do is we're going to have one more question from this section and quickly move on to the next section. This question will bleed over to the next section. And so that question is, did you have any challenging experiences, such as a difference of opinion, with any of your dissertation committee members? And if so, how was this issue resolved?
Can I comment? I'll just jump in there first. You have to remember the faculty are guiding you. But if we're at defense, whether it's the proposal or the dissertation defense, you have to provide the evidence, okay? You have to be, to have the backup to say why you're either gonna keep whatever that, the conflict or whatever discrepancy you have. Because if you could show it in the literature that your way or the methodology you're trying to use, I'm just throwing that out there, that the faculty will accept it. Because if you don't make a good case for yourself, they're gonna say, no, my way is correct, right? Unless it's statistics, okay? Because statistics, there's no way around the statistics if you guys are doing quant. But if it's, let's say, some type of theoretical framework, and you're using CRT and social capital, and you're only using maybe 3 out of the 9 tenets of CRT, you better justify why you're only using 3. Do you guys get where I'm coming from? Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Corey.
And what, Dr. Felina, can you actually address a question in the chat box that I think aligns with what you're saying? One of our participants said, well, I'm struggling with feelings, it's what I'm doing, this process scholarly, and then whether I'll actually find the data needed to answer the research questions.
We'll have Dr.
So maybe in a sense that maybe they're coming from maybe confidence or just knowing that they're on the right track, possibly.
Okay, well, you know, when you're at the proposal stage, you have to remember that your proposal wouldn't have been approved unless your committee members were confident that you're going to be able to get that data. Because if there's any issues, any gaps, anything with that methodology that it's going to stop you or not allow you to get it, they're going to ask you to refine it. That's totally different from the way I interpreted the first question. The first question is, for example, you as the doctoral student have an issue about whether or not you're going to, and I gave the example of using a particular framework or using a particular methodology. So at that point, it's a conversation, a dialogue between you and your committee as to what is the best way to move forward in obtaining that data, right? And everything is based in the literature. So if you can't prove it with the literature, your faculty is going to go back and say, show me in the literature that this way is correct or that this way is possible, okay? So what I'm trying to point out to you, don't just come cold, to your committee and say, I want to do it like this because that's it, just because I want to. They're not going to accept that. They're going to ask you, show me the money, right? Show me where, show me where anybody in the past research over the past 4 years, 10 years, depending on, what your topic is, more than likely it should be the last 4 because it's going to point out in a direction that all these other methodologies were tried and they're pointing to that this one that I want to do is a possible way to get this information, okay? With regard to that other question, that's a different issue because let's say right now in COVID-19, if those of you are right now in the gathering stages, if you were doing, for example, face-to-face interviews, USC is going to stop you because they're going to say, nope, you need to find a way. You can continue doing interviews, but it cannot be face-to-face. They're going to say, use Zoom, use Skype, use FaceTime, find some other way so that you are not jeopardizing your participants and yourself. Okay, so that's different. if you're telling me also that, let's say originally you were trying to get a specific school district, and the school district, for example, LAUSD has a separate IRB. So you were approved by USC, but LAUSD said no. Okay, that's a no-go. You're gonna have to figure out, maybe I need to go to Orange County School District to get this data, to be able to access whatever it is, superintendents, teachers, or the students. So I guess whoever wrote that question in the chat, we need to find out like what's preventing them from gathering the data. Is it pre-proposal? Let me take that back. The way it's phrased, it sounds like it's post-proposal defense. So that means there's something else stopping you from getting it, right? Either access to the email, access to those people, right? That's different. Because if you pass IRB, they said you were okay to go start collecting data.
Thank you for that. Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Just to be mindful of time, we have about 10 minutes before our session wraps. So if and I want to be able to leave some time for some additional questions and feedback, if we can go through the final question, kind of a wrap-up piece. What are the 3 pieces of advice or 3 things you wish you would have knew before defending your dissertation? So now we're in the post-dissertation phase. So we can just go one by one with the panel members. We can give just a brief advice to those going through the process, and then even those that are recently graduated. Dr. Corey, you're unmuted. Would you like to start, please?
Okay, yeah, no, certainly. I think my big piece of advice, and it's probably already been touched on, I think Evelyn talked about this, but your chairs have been where you're trying to go. So I think it's important, and I've seen this where people believe that they're like, I've heard people say, well, my chair is trying to stop me from getting where I'm trying. No, that's not the case. Like I said, it's like a coach who's trying to coach a player who's already won championships, right? Like they know what it takes to get you to the other side. And if you're not doing what it takes to get to the other side, their job is to give you that timely feedback in terms of where the gaps are, right? So long story short, I think my biggest piece is know that their job is to support you. Trust them. I think it's also important, Evelyn touched on this, trust yourself as well. You know, this and trust the process. I said it when I was piggybacking on Kelly's statement, set that timeline. That timeline is going to be everything. So trust your chair, trust the process, and get that timeline. Mm-hmm. Oh, one more thing. It just came to me. Know that I hear this all the time. People will say, you know what? I believe in the whole theory. The best dissertation is a done dissertation. Very true. But do not put out crap. Excuse my language, because you don't know who's going to read your dissertation. I mean, I get people now that are coming to me saying, "Hey, I took the time to read your dissertation. Great work. It's your work. You're the expert." Okay, and so put your best foot forward in that. One, get it done, but it'll come back to bite you if you just went through it and you don't know where your journey is going to take you. You might end up in the spotlight. Who knows? You want to make sure that whatever you put out there, if whoever reads it, it is a representation of you. Put your best foot forward.
I agree with that. I think I'm unmuted. Yes, I agree with what Corey shared. Know where you're going. And yes, you want to make sure your dissertation is done, but you do want to put your best work out there. So again, mine's a little different because I had curriculum design, but I made sure in working with, and I trust my committee, I trust my chair, and made sure, and when working with them, that they were guiding me. I ran everything through them, and I really did. I had full faith in them that they had my best interest. So when they would come back with something at you, it's not them trying to say, nope, stop, this is wrong. It's, well, okay, look at it from this perspective. And having those challenging and intellectual conversations, I think, will make your dissertation even stronger and even better. And what was the other portion of the question? I think that was that.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question?
You did.
Okay. I felt like I was missing something else, but also to touch on, I think it was something that Kelly said earlier, to make sure you take that time for yourself. because you don't want to lose who you are as an individual, as a spouse, a significant other, a parent. Make sure that you have those roles set as well. So yes, you're a practitioner, scholar, but you also want to make sure that you are patient with yourself. And Dr. Castillo said too, whether you get a sentence done, a paragraph done, or you got a whole chapter done, you're doing this. So what Corey shared, you're starting with the end in mind, but give yourself patience as you get there.
Dr. Theo, last words, advice?
Yeah, so I'll just say no to imposter syndrome. I think I haven't said those specific 2 words, right? I think by the time you get to your defense date, right, you shouldn't be stressed at all. You go in, you have a bottle of water, but by that point, you know that you know that you know that you know, right? And your chairs also know that as well, right? And so I think sometimes there's so much buildup. We worked for so long. We did so much writing. We've done all this stuff. But by the time you actually get to the day, it should be a piece of cake. You should have booked a time slot for your favorite restaurant, given the fact that we may be able to go outside, right? The celebration should be already set. And so just know that you're going to get to the point where you're not even thinking about the theories that you're going to use, or if you understand what the problem is, you already have it done. Right now, it doesn't feel like that because you're not there yet. You're still in the process, but you will get there. You'll be able to sit back and kick back and be on a panel just like this, and it'll be fun. So that's my advice, just to know that you'll get there.
Kelly?
Yeah, everyone has made really excellent points. For me, I'm in the final throes of this process, and so, which is very exciting. Know yourself, like Ginny said, know your values, and take care of those and your priorities, the people who you're accountable to and who rely on you. But also have that inner confidence in and be reliant on yourself. One thing that I would just add on a little bit on the more technical side is that, as much as your chair and your committee are those who, have preceded you, they've done this process before, this is your ship and you're a captain. And so say, please find attached my revised chapter 4. I am interested in feedback on the methods and scope section. Would you be willing and able to provide advice within 6 weeks, right? So really be running the ship and be soliciting feedback along the way to also make the process at the end a lot less painful, right? So for me, I've been sending, chapters as they've been completed, and then those have come back, and I've been revising them as I continue. And as your project changes and moves in the latter ends, you also need to be going back to the beginning to make sure that it's cohesive as a whole. So have that organization and have your committee know that you are keeping track, and that will also keep them on track because they have a lot of demands on their time as well. They have a lot of students. Sometimes they'll be like, you know what, Kendrick just has his stuff together. I don't have to worry about him. No, I am the student who's you have to worry about me, not in a fearful way, right? But I want you, not forgetting about me, giving me the feedback that I need to advance the project as I need it. Oh, I want to submit the first part of the first chapter as an article now. Is it in shape? What do I need to do to go from chapter to article? So just be in the driver's seat consistently. Because you're the scholar, this is the defining moment of your career so far, and it's going to launch what's to come. And so just be very clear about what you need, the time in which you need it, and be incorporating and revising along the way. So that, people, they bring mimosa ingredients ready to the end of their dissertation, or cupcakes, or whatever it is, right? Because the outcome as you're walking into that room, and all these preparatory measures will give you that extra bit of confidence.
Thank you, Kelly. That was awesome.
All right, thanks everybody. So we're at time, so we're going to start wrapping up now. First off, I just want to say thank you so much to our amazing panelists. Oh my gosh, y'all gave us so much information, so much knowledge, so much wisdom that we can take on our doctoral journey. And I think that, you know, that's the kind of thing that Jenga is here for, is to get that mentorship out there. And I'm just so thankful and grateful. And I'm sure most of the folks on the call are thankful and grateful as well. And as we're moving forward, you know, y'all see we have the contact information that is in the chat bar. Please send us an email with questions or recommendations of things that y'all want to see in the future. Also, please, we are looking for more board members to join Jenga, right? We want to be a strong and powerful student organization that continues to help and provide mentorship to students just like you and I. And other than that, you know, I also want to thank Dr. Evelyn Miss Evelyn for putting this together and letting us use DSC. And thank you for our moderator, Dr. Marcedes Butler, and our founder, Dr. Airies Davis. Everybody just worked together to pull this all together, and I think it's been an amazing event. And please give us feedback. We want to make sure that we are doing the best for all of you. So other than that, thank you, and have a good rest of your weekend.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who want to stay for Weekend Right, we're in our break time now. So at 1 o'clock, Dr.